Snow White is what, 5 months away, 6 months away from coming out? And from everything that we've been hearing about what's going on behind the scenes, this movie's been nothing but a mess. It's also been nothing but a PR nightmare for Disney. And if rumors about this movie and its production budget are true, then this movie has really mathematically zero chance of making money in theaters. I'm on that Park Place. We got another rumor regarding this movie. The budget for Disney's live-action Snow White starring Rachel Zegler reportedly exploded to over $500 million. The rumor comes from WDW Pro. He says, "I am told there have been 3 reshoots of this film and that Disney is now still working to fix the thing." And he was talking about some of the stuff they were doing in reshoots a couple months ago. And of all the things that WDW Pro said that Disney was changing during the reshoots, there was one overall change that I found pretty interesting. And what he said was, "Finally, a 3rd set of reshoots has just wrapped, and according to our source, these are a result of a movie that was still seen as incoherent and disjointed. The attempt was made to more closely align the film to the original animated feature-length film, while still allowing the Zegler version to have a pro-fempowerment message, albeit one that is softer and less militant." Now, why did I find that interesting? Well, because a few years ago, the star of Snow White, Rachel Zegler, she was making statements like this.
I mean, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah.
Weird.
Super weird.
So we didn't do that this time.
Yeah, she was basically insulting the original Disney Snow White. And she made plenty of other statements too at the time. She was saying that Snow White in this live-action adaptation, she's going to be a strong, fierce, empowered girl boss leader. She and Gal Gadot really emphasized that Snow White is not going to be saved by a prince because having a woman be rescued by a man is toxic, it's problematic. But don't worry, Rachel Zegler and company, they're going to fix all the problems with the original classic Disney Snow White, a movie that a ton of people loved. And a lot of people looked at these statements that she made and said, you know what, I don't really like her. A couple months or so later, after these statements started resurfacing, Disney announced that they're delaying the movie by a full year. It was supposed to come out in March of this year. Instead, it's going to come out in March 2025 next year. The reason they cited was the actors' strikes, which that may be true. But I'm also thinking that with the whole PR nightmare around this movie, Disney had to have been hoping that a 1-year delay would give audiences plenty of time to maybe forget all the stuff that Rachel Zegler said insulting the original Snow White. However, Disney released a trailer for Snow White very recently, and based on the reaction for it, I have to conclude that no, nobody's forgotten any of the stuff that Zegler has said. Okay, but back to this rumor. So WDW Pro said, "I am told there have been 3 reshoots of this film and that Disney is now still working to fix the thing." He added, "In particular, there are 2 areas that Disney is working to resolve before its release in March, which is just a few months away, 5 months, 6 months. And he says that the dwarfs have been roundly mocked and that they have been mocked at the level of the original Sonic the Hedgehog model in that film. Of course, Sega and Paramount went back to work and redid the entire model, redid the entire film to make the character look like it does in the video games. With this one, they're not going to have that much time to do everything that needs to be done, and they have 7 models that need to be adjusted." And then here he says they're trying to adjust the color. But this is the interesting part. WDW Pro then declared, "The big story about all of this is that Disney apparently is trying to get this movie ready to go on the cheap. And the reason that it might be done on the cheap is because they've already done 3 reshoots. We know that this film had a budget that was somewhere around $300 million. They have overshot that significantly according to my source, and this film is now heading towards The Force Awakens and the Rise of Palpatine, that's what I'm going to call it, kind of budget." And here's the big note, we're nearing the $500 million mark according to the source he shared. Now the title of this article says the budget exploded to over $500 million. Right here he says the budget is approaching or nearing the $500 million mark. Either way, $500 million, that's an enormous budget for a movie. Now we can talk all we want about all the stuff the star of Snow White has said, calling the prince a stalker, saying the original Snow White is dated. And by the way, she's been giving some more interviews very recently where she's making some more statements that aren't exactly going to help the film. This quote here is from Variety. "Zegler's not surprised by what she sees as people's willful misunderstanding of her comments. Saying the prince literally stalks her, saying that the original Snow White is dated. How are people willfully misunderstanding those comments? But anyway, it's par for the course for an outspoken young woman in the public eye. I've watched women get torn down my whole life, my whole career, she says. We'll watch it in the election that's upcoming. We're going to witness that for a long time, I fear. Sometimes it can feel like we're going back. It certainly felt that way when that was happening. So she's playing the woman card. And this sort of thing is typical. Whenever Hollywood makes a terrible adaptation for a story or an unfaithful adaptation, the way they defend themselves or the way they shield themselves against criticism is by having a diverse cast. And then when people criticize the terrible show or terrible movie that they made, they simply just call the fans Rossist or Soxist, in this case here, Soxist. Now, talking about women being torn down in the election, yes, she is right about that. Kamala has been getting torn down, as she puts it. The Orange Man, on the other hand, all he's had to deal with was, being 1 inch away from being removed from this planet. There's also this headline: Rachel Zegler reveals the origin of Snow White's name is changed in new live-action Disney version. How did they change it? It fell back to another version of Snow White that was told in history where she survived a snowstorm that occurred when she was a baby, Zegler said. And so the king and queen decided to name her Snow White to remind her of her resilience. One of the core points in our film for any young woman or young person is remembering how strong you actually are, she added. Now she says that there's another version of Snow White where Snow White survived a snowstorm when she was a baby. Have any of you heard of a version of Snow White where she survives a snowstorm? Because I have not. I've tried to look that up, I haven't found anything. I mean, maybe it's out there. There are multiple versions of the Cinderella fairy tale, but this I have not heard of. If any of you have heard of this version of Snow White, by all means, please comment below and tell me where it's from. But the greater point here, folks, is that when you look at everything surrounding this movie, what's going on behind the scenes, according to rumors, you look at the PR nightmare, this movie really has no chance of succeeding in theaters. People don't like the woman who's starring as Snow White. They don't like all the comments that she made about the original Snow White. Common sense tells me that with the PR nightmare around this movie, Disney had to have been hoping that the 1-year delay would give people time to forget about all the controversial statements that Zegler has made. But Disney released a trailer for Snow White recently. It doesn't look like anybody's forgotten, and now she's starting to give some interviews again where she's making some more statements that aren't exactly going to help this movie. And in addition to that, if the rumors are true that the Snow White budget is at $500 million, between having to make back the production budget for this movie, between having to make back the marketing budget for this movie, whatever that's going to be, and between theaters taking a good chunk of the box office revenue, for this movie to break even, it's going to have to probably make a good $1 billion, give or take. And that's just to break even. I mean, mathematically speaking, this movie has no chance of succeeding. Do any of you people think that this movie's going to break $1 billion at the box office? Does anyone think it's even going to break $500 million? With the amount of controversy around this movie, I don't think so. If Disney had just decided to follow the original Snow White, the original Disney Snow White classic, keep all the fempowerment and other current day messages out of it, there wouldn't be any controversy around this movie. Audiences would actually be looking forward to it, and their production budget might be smaller because they wouldn't be doing as many reshoots. And having a smaller production budget would make it even easier for this movie to break even. But the people at Disney, the people in Hollywood, they're not entertainers, they're activists. On their own, they are not capable of keeping their activism out of anything. And as a result, this Snow White live-action remake, it is a PR nightmare for Disney, and in a few months, it's going to be a big flop that's going to lose a lot of money for Disney. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. Take care until then.